Welcome, everybody. 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, April of 2023, we were kind of just beginning to take in how big AI was going to become in every aspect of life. But we were keenly interested in how this could impact our documentary filmmaking. And so we brought in two guest experts, Philip Shane and Basil Shadid, to do one of these focused face-to-faces. It was by far the most popular, well-attended one we've ever done. We had well over 800 RSVPs for it. More than 450 attendees showed up. And it's by far the most viewed recording we have on our YouTube channel. So I thought it'd be really interesting to bring them back 2 years later and see what changes have gone on, how it's being utilized now, what new tools are coming out. And one of the first things that I noticed was that instead of, we had, I think, only about 235 RSVPs for this. And it looks like we have 135 attendees as of now. And what that tells me is that we are using it now. In these 2 years, we've started utilizing it more and more. We're more comfortable with it. We're doing our own research into it. It's not the curiosity that it was. But all that said, because it's being used in every aspect, I thought it would be great to have Philip and Basil back and talk about where it's all come, what's going on now, where it's going. Erica touched on the idea of obviously it's all in our forefront of our minds, some of the ethical issues around AI. We will get to that if we have time towards the end. But we want to focus as much time as possible on sort of the practical aspects of AI. It's so fascinating. Philip and Basil and I were in the green room, and we were off and running, and we had to kind of call a timeout because we were leaving it on the floor there, as it were. So I want to bring them on. Welcome, Basil. Welcome, Philip. You've gotten quite well known in these past 2 years, but do a brief intro for people who haven't met you yet. Why don't you, Basil? Why don't you start? And what are you doing now, and all that?
Yeah. Well, hello everyone, and thanks for joining this. Philip and I have actually done a few of these over the last 2 years together. The initial one, and then the two of us have gotten to chat in front of other groups of people, and it's always a great conversation. I'm Basil Shadid. I am a producer in the documentary world, and also I'm also a producer and EP in in the world of tech marketing. So in terms of AI, I am deeply involved. I use it, I think about it, I talk about it. And then also I'm in a lot of rooms in the tech world where I see its development, and I see where it's going, and where people are thinking about it, and kind of in those spaces. So I get a little bit of an early preview, and I also get to develop my own thoughts on that based on how I see the tech world using it. And then these days, in terms of producing, I'm doing a lot of impact or consulting producing, and then some of my own just solo producing. But in that way, I'm trying to think about how to bring it to projects or not bring it to projects, and how people think about it, and or want it or don't want it, and all of that. And it's always kind of, now it's part of the conversation of every film, whereas 2 years ago it was not. So that's my intro. I'll hand it over to Philip.
Cool. Yeah, as Basil said, he and I have done a number of talks, and It is really fun, and it's interesting to talk in front of different audiences. Different audiences have different desires of the kinds of things they want to do, and also different people have different preconceptions about AI, some of which are not accurate. They're based on hype and things like that. That's kind of part of the process. But basically, for those who don't know, I just say I'm a documentary filmmaker, like probably most of you. I'm directing, I've been working on for a while now, a documentary about the video game Myst. MYST. It was kind of a classic game. It was one of the first video games put in the Museum of Modern Art in their permanent collection. So it's a pretty interesting story. I also was one of the editors on an amazing movie that's out now, traveling around the country and the world, called Sabbath Queen. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's Sandy Dubowski's film. And I've been doing a lot of I'm working on films. I'm also working with my friend and partner, Constance Marks, who made Being Elmo. We're working on another film about Sesame Street these days, which is pretty fun. In fact, if there's a smile on my face, it's because I got to go to the Sesame Street set a week ago, and I'm still beaming from it, which is always fun. Um, as far as AI goes, though, I've been teaching a lot. I've been doing a lot of, well, I run a weekly group, which some of you are members of, and I love seeing you there. And I invite other people who are interested to contact me. I'll put my link in the chat. But I run a weekly Zoom gathering, kind of based on the D-Word style. We do it on Monday nights, and it's called AI Cafe. And we've got almost 100 members now, which is pretty amazing. Um, all kinds of different people, mostly filmmakers, but also people who create content for YouTube and other formats and things like that. People who are just interested in AI and who are genuinely experimenting with AI. And one of the best things about that group for me is I get to, in fact, really one of the reasons I created it, among getting to hang out with cool people, is getting to see and keep in touch with a zillion different ways that people are using AI in their work, all of which are creative and fascinating. So yeah, that's pretty much what I'm doing, and a proud ambassador of the D word, thanks to Doug Block, who tapped me on the shoulder one day at the beer garden.
Um, thanks, guys. So, what you said, Phil, just leads into the first and obvious question.
Yeah.
You guys are both really on top of how filmmakers are using AI. What are some of the most common ways they're using AI now?
I think two of the most common are, one, using ChatGPT or other large language models, but ChatGPT is by far the best well known, to uh, do outlines, to rough out scripts, or even to help with planning, and basically using ChatGPT as an assistant in different ways, and also for research, for which my first pro tip for all of you is I go on and on about this thing called deep research mode. So ChatGPT, no matter no matter what version of ChatGPT you're using, there's a little button at the bottom. I believe you'll see. It looks like a little telescope. And if you click on it, it turns on this deep research mode that you ask it a question and it goes off and it'll spend 15 minutes or even up to half an hour researching this thing you asked it to do. And then it will come back with a really well-written and organized report, essentially full of citations and links, so you can check. And so the reason I mentioned deep research right now is because instantly my mind said, "Ooh, AI for research is a bad thing because it hallucinates." Deep research, and Gemini also has a deep research mode. It's the most accurate way of doing it. Not flawless, but neither are people. But anyway, I recommend that. So that's one of the basically all many different ways that you can use ChatGPT. Another way is, I think, people are using Midjourney or other image generation sites to create images that they might then turn into B-roll. And so it's certainly a smaller number of the audience because it's a slightly more sophisticated thing to do, but to create videos, but that's a big thing that people are starting to do, and obviously is a natural thing for films, especially for independent filmmakers like ourselves on a budget. You can raise the production value of your film perhaps by creating something that might replace stock footage, for instance, or things like that. Or you can take photographs that you were going to use in your film. If it's an interview-based film, you might take a photograph and, give it to Midjourney or something like that and give it a little style, something like that, it's a little bit easier than you might do with After Effects or things like that. So yeah, and lastly, then I'll hand it to you, Basil, for your thoughts. I think 11 Labs voice synthesis is a really popular thing for just giving it text and having it read by an automated voice is one of the things you could do. Another thing you can do is you can use it for translation or just translation in general. I think I'll just end on this because I think translation is probably one of the most profound. It's not sexy, it's not talked about a lot, but it's one of the most singularly profound things that's happened.
Yeah.
Basically, you can instantly translate anything into any language, including change the voice so it looks like that person is actually speaking that language in their own voice. So it's pretty amazing. What do you think, Basil?
Yeah, all of that is great. I think that there's, the way I like to talk about it is that you have kind of generative AI, which I think that like there's all these categories of AI, and generative AI being one of them, and generative AI being a tool that generates, content, whether that be text, answers, research, images, video, all those things, which is like I would say the largest bucket that we use when we think about AI. I think beyond generative AI, there's like AI that processes things. There's AI that, can like analyze things. And there's different buckets. And so like in terms of processing, let's say in terms of documentary film, there are tools like Descript Underlord or Opus. Philip and I were just talking about that can process transcripts and literally turn them into edits. Not edits that you might end up in your final film, but edits that can give you a way to think about other ways to edit your material. There are audience analysis tools that literally you can have someone watch everything from your trailer to your rough cuts to whatever, and it can in real time give you emotion analysis based on what people are doing with their eyes and their face rather than what they tell you at the end of the film. And it's a really interesting way to collect a ton of information, both on like how people are like how their face is processing what you're showing them, and also like in specifically in terms of time code. Like it's really easy to like root out that like at 9 minutes in your film gets really boring for like 90% of the people who just watched it or whatever. And there's a ton of other examples as well, but I would say that like I've been really focusing on the development process right now. And then in the development process, I think most filmmakers can use AI as an assistant to help you get from idea to treatment, even treatment with animatic, like some boards, some like visual references, things like that. Um, a lot easier than before with a lot less resource, like financial resource. And I think that that is really going to change the game. I know I had a ton of ideas. Like at one point, I had a ton of ideas of projects for many years that I was like, oh, what about this? What about this? And then I like dumped them into the AI tools that I use and got them all to about 80% treatment, and then looked at them and then was like finally got them to a place where I could really look at them and then was like, oh God, these 6 projects, I'm so glad I never touched them. These few are interesting and they can kind of funnel into projects I might consider. And it was just like really helpful to get them further than the idea stage.
I want to spend quite a bit of time on generative AI because it seems to be the big thing going on right now. But before I do, I just want to follow up on the large language models. Philip, you said we tend to think of ChatGPT when we think of it, but there are several now. There's Claude, there's Gemini. Can you sort of distinguish between the two? ChatGPT is now 4.0, I think, is the latest iteration of it. Or is there something even more evolved than that? Like which one do you use and why?
So I use ChatGPT the most. Not necessarily out of some hard conviction because they are all pretty close. Those three at least are kind of the three, the Coke, Pepsi, and I don't know, Tab of of the bunch. But you don't have, I would say this, that you don't have to know what model ChatGPT is running. If you do know about that stuff, then you know enough that you could choose there are different models to choose from. For the most part, you don't need to think about it. You go to ChatGPT, it's going to be set for some default thing and it's going to be the best, that they have. So when they upgrade, it'll just automatically upgrade. But ChatGPT, partly because it's owned by OpenAI, and they package it comes as a bundle with a number of other things. So when you get ChatGPT and you subscribe, you get at least some level of use of Sora, their video site. ChatGPT will also generate images within the chat bot, which is convenient, although I believe Gemini now does that too, or will soon. Claude does not do that. So anyway, it just does a little bit more variety of things. And there's some other stuff too that sort of, if once you get in a little deeper in the weeds,
It's a paid version though, right?
So all the services offer paid and non-paid versions. Generally, the unpaid versions, I just recommend you just go try that. If for some reason you find yourself using the service enough or you want to use something that you don't have, you'll then see, okay, then just step up to the very next level of pay. And one pro tip for that is and this is true for any subscriptions I recommend, but especially AI, where you want to try for this month, but you don't want to forget and get stuck accidentally paying month after month after month when you stopped using it. So you can join any site and then immediately cancel it, and you'll still get the 1 month you just paid for. Will be fine. But what will happen is it won't automatically renew you the next month, so you'll be reminded to do it again, which I find helpful.
Just like subscription VOD.
Yeah. All subscription services do that.
Yes.
Claude is a better. But it used to be true that Claude was a much better writer than ChatGPT. It used to be that ChatGPT was really cheesy in its style and Claude was better. They're much closer now, I would say. But I still use Claude when it's something I really want written nicely. For instance, I do a science podcast every week, and I use Claude to write the descriptions for the show. I give it a transcript of the entire show, and I just say, write me a 1-paragraph description to go with the podcast. And Claude just does a slightly better job, honestly, not extremely better, but does a slightly better job.
Yeah, Gemini is a little more flattering, I've found, or Gem, as I now call her. We have a relationship.
Oh, very nice.
She was very, very sweet. And then suddenly it was like she coldly asked me for $19.99 a month, and that was the end of it.
Yeah, everybody has their price. Gemini does some things that are quite interesting. Again, it's hard to keep track with Google because they have so many varieties of
I
services.
like Gemini for research. Like I find that Gemini's research, like if you run a research prompt through ChatGPT's deep research and Gemini's deep research, personally, I find Gemini's deep research more thorough and with more sources, and so that's super helpful. But I mean, and so to jump on, like I actually use a tool called Manus, which I swear by and love.
How do you spell that?
manus.im is the URL. It's a Chinese developed tool. It's like an agentic AI that just launched a chat feature. I don't necessarily use it for the chat. I use it for the agentic AI. So you can have like the other day, I thought of an idea. I was in San Francisco on a project and I thought of an idea for a book. And I was like, oh, that would be a cool book to read. And then I like used ChatGPT to help develop the characters and the beats of the book. And then I dropped it into Manus and I was like, write me a 30,000 word book based on these beats. And it did within 30 minutes. It gave me back the book. And on the flight home, I read the book. That it was like a shitty pre-first draft version of the book, but it was still like I was like, I'm reading the book, the idea that I had, and I like the entire plane ride back, it took my attention. So it can do long tasks like writing books. It can like, you can feed it the like the core application, documentary application, and the Sundance impact thing, and feed it your treatment and be like, go write my grant and write my impact statement, and it'll just do all of that, and it'll give you like really lengthy, like thorough documents. So I love Manus. I swear by it. The other thing that I do, we'll talk about ethical stuff later, but all the AI stuff is very energy intensive. Um, there's a model called DeepSeek that is also a Chinese built model that's like a comparison model to ChatGPT. And DeepSeek is an open source model that you can actually get for free. And on my computer, I have a program called LM Studio. And through LM Studio, I download it, like it gives me opportunity to download DeepSeek. And so I can run my chats locally on my machine without using any data center costs, any energy. So if I'm doing a lot of just general, and it doesn't ask me for $20 extra a month, it doesn't do the deep research, but like for most of the chat stuff, I do them locally on my machine in LM Studio using DeepSeek.
I'd like to follow up on that and also invite everybody who's watching and in the chat to put in their like favorite AI tools, much like Basil just did. So I want to ask you both for more. Like, give us more of your like maybe lesser known tools
I mean,
that.
here's what I'll say. I think that at some point it becomes a personal choice of tools. Like, I mean, we're happy to drop links and like Philip's AI Cafe. I rarely go to the cafe, but I love the email summaries
Oh,
after
good.
because I'm just like clicking on links to like learn about what people are talking about. Um, but there's so many tools out there. And I think at some point, you as a filmmaker start to develop your own routine of like what tools work for you in what instances of like which phase of your project. So again, if you're in development, like there's the idea stage of development, there's the research stage, there's like getting interview questions, like all those things might be the same tool, or like in some cases, if you have access to multiple tools, they might be different tools. So anyway, I'll just put that out there while we're all throwing out tools as well. But for me, Manus, DeepSeek, ChatGPT, Gemini, I have access to a lot of tools, which I'm lucky for. So I use a lot of them for different things. Claude is
Yeah.
great, yeah, as like an analytical, like Claude is really great if I feed it treatments and tell it to like rip them apart. It's fantastic for giving me feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I just ran asked Chat GPT 4.0 about Claude and Gemini. I said, "Are you better? Like, what do you think of those guys?" They were very kind. They were actually much less competitive than I thought it would be. It was like, well, they have their uses. They're good in their own ways. So Philip, what about you?
Yeah.
What do you love? What are some of your favorites?
Yeah, I think well the ones I find myself going to the most are ChatGPT by far. I use that in so many different ways. I mean, it's so helpful and fun, frankly. But Claude, I also use Claude and uh, Midjourney. I love Midjourney. I just think it's so beautiful. I mean, there's many, many
Too.
image generation sites, and they're all good. And frankly, there are some that will do certain things that I'll mention this. One other reason you end up these days, I think, using lots of different sites is because one reason is they keep every site is changing rapidly. So from week to week, you don't know what one site suddenly offers a new thing. So it's worth going to try it. But another thing is, let's say you're trying to do a particular thing. I'm trying to write in an email or something like that, and I'm finding ChatGPT not doing a good job. So I'll go to Claude or I'll go to Gemini. Um, and same with the image websites. You might find that this particular image, this prompt, every time I prompt Midjourney to make this image for me, it does something ridiculous. It keeps putting the rabbit in the sky. So I go to another image generation website. But mainly I use ChatGPT, Claude, Midjourney, Runway, one of the cool video sites, although I feel like Midjourney now offers video, as I mentioned, just as of a couple days ago, and I'm hoping that's going to be really good. It looks good so far. I'd love to stay within Midjourney to do that, but Runway is very good. Runway, also fun fact for those of us who are in New York, or any of you who went to New York University, Runway was founded by some NYU grads, so where I also went. So I'm proud of them for doing so well. And the last one I would just mention is in music, I use Suno.
How do you spell that?
Suno.
Okay.
There's another website called Udio, Udio. That's also good. Frankly, again, they are Coke and Pepsi, I think, in terms of music, but Suno has become a little bit more popular, perhaps for some reasons. I don't use the music a lot, but I would say for documentary usage, if you need like temp music really fast and just some quick and dirty thing, it's interesting. You go to Suno, most of these music websites are geared towards making songs and pretty bad songs for the most part, if you ask me. But you can go into instrumental mode and then say, give me some quiet piano music for a documentary or whatever. And you'll tend to get some nice stuff. Again, totally just as temp music, because it's not going to be great, but it will get you going. Yeah.
Erica, I am not able for some reason to message individual people, so I couldn't message Michael, but one of our D-Word ambassadors, Michael Lapointe, is just made a pretty remarkable 4-minute demo using Midjourney and Runway, I believe. And I wanted to give Michael the opportunity, hopefully you're prepared, Michael, to share like a minute or so of that with us.
I'm just going to add, because I know Michael's going to say it. He used Midjourney and whatever these other websites,
Runway,
and
I think.
also used human labor.
Yeah.
Human labor involved.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to say. Like the demo I'm going to show is $130 worth of software and 30 to 40 hours of my time, or at least the whole 5-minute version is. But so I made a documentary development sizzle that is mostly generative AI and archival. So like some actual archival. For context, since I'm probably just going to show a minute or so, it's about fantasy authors in the industrial era who were trying to rise above their lot in life. And it's told through the perspective of their most famous characters. So
Hans Christian Andersen was born into poverty so extreme that it would later colour his darkest tales. Before he was a teenager, he had worked in a factory and witnessed his mother reduced to begging, sleeping in the same bed where his father's corpse had lain. With calculated persistence, Andersen climbed the social ladder, writing flattering poems to kings and queens and insinuating himself into the homes of the wealthy, becoming what one patron called a living work of charity. Open my heart and let it bleed out to yours. L. Frank Baum knew failure intimately, a man who watched his hardware store crumble, his newspaper fold and his theatrical ambitions falter. Yet from these ashes emerged Oz.
Father built this yellow brick road. He knew what happened when we follow the paths determined for us in life by others.
At his height, Baum was among the wealthiest writers in the world. By his death in 1919, he had nothing. He died broke.
Father would say, "I think you are wrong to want a heart. It makes most people unhappy. If you only knew it, you are in luck not to have a heart." He knew what it meant to feel it break.
Was this Baum's confession that to create one must be heartless? That ambition requires a certain ruthlessness, even if you lose everything?
Okay, it's great. It's like I couldn't even begin to tell you to stop it. It's so surprising.
So good.
So tell us a little bit more about what went into that, Michael. What you said you used mostly Runway and Midjourney?
yeah, I mean, I think a little bit of the previous discussion, what generative AI you use really depends on kind of aesthetics and preference. So this is image to video using Midjourney version 7, which is the latest version, and Runway generation 4. Yeah, so it's all image to video. with obviously there's some archival and some kind of invisible AI softwares like Topaz. 11 Labs did all the voices. So yeah, it's a process for sure.
So there's no text-based prompting on this, right? It was like with VO3 and some of the things coming out now.
Well, it is text-based prompting. It's text-based prompting for images from Midjourney, and then using the images to be animated in Runway. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So to get, I think it's important to say, like, can somebody just kind of jump in and do this kind of trailer? No, this is a lot of things in Midjourney called personalization and doing mood boards and really designing the aesthetics in the world. It's not something that you can just kind of write a prompt.
Yeah.
You kind of have to know the software a little bit and be very, very, very patient.
Yeah. Do you want to
With the
remind
software.
people how many hours it took you to do that? The 4
So
minute
my initial one took me 30 hours, and this is like a revision that took me like 10 hours. And yes, it should be I do edit movie trailers and what have you, so I'm pretty quick at that. The 30 hours does include like the actual editing and putting it together. I the writing is me. It's not like Claude or ChatGPT. It's not really there yet, as Philip and Basil were saying. Um, yeah, that's pretty much. The music is actually human beings too, but other than that, everything else is AI.
So one last question: when you're taking, when you have a shot where the background is fairly steady, but somebody is walking through a doorway or coming at you, what's creating the movement?
That's done in Runway. So like in Runway, you would prompt. It's image to video, but you still have the ability to do prompts. So you can say dolly in, or a great Runway prompt is just to say cinematic action, and kind of let it decide what's the best way to do that. So yeah, it's a little mix and match with the
Right.
prompts in terms of that. And there's other softwares. There's software like Kling, which is probably a little better for that, which you can just literally pick, do a pan, do a tilt, do a
Right.
dolly.
And then become slower, faster, more, that kind of
Yes, yeah, actually,
refinement
yes.
for the prompts.
Right, in Runway, I think in Kling 2 and some of these other softwares, you can actually slow your shots down now. You can expand your shots. And theoretically, you could probably do an entire one take movie if you like planned it out right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So camera control's a lot better. That's definitely something that's really advanced in the last 4 or 5
Right.
months, probably.
So, your sizzle opens up all these ethical issues that we promised we would get to at the end. It's so tempting to just go down that path of things like copyright infringement, transparency. How it will be. Will it be obvious in the thing stated, is this AI or not? And that's so I want to turn it back, and feel free to stay on, Michael, and join us as part of this talk. But let's talk about generative AI and what I'm really interested in, what I read about VO3 and its capabilities, because it looked like a fiction film, from what I saw of the demos. First of all, do you guys want to bring us up to date? For those who don't know what that is, why don't you tell us?
Well, VO3 is just the latest video generation, generative video service from Google.
It's Google, right? Yeah.
Google, and it is extraordinary. It's so interesting because this is one thing in particular, is one of the most direct things that I've been thinking of to talk about today versus when we talked 2 years ago. When we talked 2 years ago, I remember saying multiple times, the video AI it's not there yet. It'll get there probably within a year or two. And what do you know? I should have put money down on that because it is here. In fact, VO3, I would say for me, was the thing that crossed the threshold, and that only came out like a month ago. a couple of things that it does differently. One, it has a smoothness and there is a realness to the video that is unparalleled. Another thing is it comes with sound and dialogue. Like, you don't even have to write the dialogue. You could write the dialogue if you wanted, but you could just say, these people are talking about this, and it'll make up the lines, and they will actually say, the characters in the scene will say it. There will be music and sound effects with the scene. So it's like unbelievable.
I just keep thinking of young Steven Spielberg at 8 years old playing around with his Super 8 camera and now having access to VO3 and creating these like very weird, spectacular films from like the minds of 8-year-olds.
I think that, I mean, to that point, I really think that, we are at a place where people who can afford the $250 Google Flow subscription and get access, or the, like Michael said, $130 this thing, like, can, like, which is a lot cheaper than it would take to like bring cameras out and film. It's like, can like make projects. And I think there's a lot. I mean, if you go on YouTube, there's like just loads and loads and loads of these AI generated videos that are coming out, and people are stringing them together, and you see the storytelling is starting to get better with it, and you see like people who know how to edit start to edit. You're like, oh, here's someone who's trained in editing, cutting together these things in a way that like is compelling, or like, for example, there's like, you can tell a lot of AI video because it's a lot of like wide shots, like, it's like and then you don't have the reverses and you don't have the close up, there's like a lot of this interesting thing. And then you start to be like, oh, can I play with that? And it'll all get there and it'll all get better. But I made an animated film for my kid out of a story that I tell her at, bedtime. And it was like a 53 shot film that was like, all the scenes like end up in like 50, like the shot list of 53 shots. And it was incredibly hard to get it to do like.
Stay back here.
Oh, Erica, we need to mute everyone, I guess. Thank you.
Anyway, it was incredibly hard to like manipulate Midjourney into VO in a way that would get me the proper like just like the pull, the wide shot and then the medium, then the close up and then the reverses, and like to do all that to make it feel to me like a real animated film. I mean, it was just like, I mean, hard is a light word, but it was fascinating to to do and see its limitations now. And I think that those limitations are constantly being worked on. And as Philip said, like 2 years ago, we were like 2 years away. And now what are we going to see in 2 years?
Because we can't get to all the issues involved with what is emerging, what are the ramifications of this? I invite people to toss it around. I noticed there's like a lot of discussion going on in the chat. And that'll be a great place to put your thoughts in, folks. And we're going to open it up in about 10 minutes for your questions. So when that time comes, use the raised hand function, and I'll be calling on you for that. But it kind of leads into this question of, with imagery getting so good and so beautiful, how do you guys, what ways can that work in documentary? There's a certain, there's the issue of transparency. We don't want to kind of fake that this is real. We want to acknowledge where the sources came from, but, just in a creative way, even, and this also gets back to Michael's demo, which was, I saw he showed me the 4-minute version, and we talked about it, and, it reminded me of a reaction that I had when I first saw the Kubrick movie, Barry Lyndon, that the images were just spectacular, unbelievable. Every image seemed like a painting. And then after about 15, 20 minutes, I'm going like, okay, what's the story? You kind of get used to it very quickly, how gorgeous it is. And we're so wired for story. And it it makes me wonder, how do we incorporate this, AI into storytelling in documentary in a way that, doesn't like cross boundaries, I guess, is one way to put it.
I mean, the first thing I would say for anyone who hasn't looked at it, go to the Archival Producers Alliance AI best practices guidelines, because I think that there's a way in which we use films in like factual that we use images in factual documentaries that can actually like go back and change how people like it's like if in 50 years from now someone watches your film that's full of a bunch of AI generated images and think that's historical record because it's mixed with historical footage, what does that actually do? And there's a huge can of worms discussion around like the ethical nature of that. But I think that and the Archival Producers Alliance is doing a really great job of like addressing that and like having that conversation. But what I would say is that I think that there's in terms of using AI in an actual film, I think we're at the point where you could easily cut in shots of AI generated footage mixed in with live action footage, or entirely replace scenes, or like Philip said earlier, like if you're searching for B-roll on a stock site, why not just you can just generate that footage yourself. Like there's so many ways that people can use it. And then it becomes this matter of like how much do you actually talk about how you're using it. And like I heard someone once say there's not a writer's room in Hollywood without a laptop or with a laptop that doesn't have ChatGPT on it or whatever. So
And I
like
can see for anybody doing a historical documentary where, it used to be like, where's our B-roll? What's our, where can we drum up images of this person who died 200 years ago? And now, my God, you can kind of almost recreate them.
I would also suggest that I find it much more fun to turn everything into a creative, because I'm a creative person, turn it into a creative problem solving thing, or just a fun thing about limitations or whatever. So, think about how can you celebrate the fact that this is imaginative, let's say, and yeah, do whatever. I mean, these are not new questions. Those of us who have been in the business for a little while, you've encountered this. I mean, this goes all the way back to Nanook of the North, this notion of reenactments or things like that. Not that he necessarily solved them in a way we would solve them now, but nonetheless, use these things as create. And I think one thing that's going to be really fun is, I suggest to people, celebrate the real thing, celebrate the authentic object in your film, because what's going to happen is, as you say, everything is going to be artificial. I don't think that's a bad thing either, but let's say it's going to be the norm. It's going to have this look to it, whatever this and that, and it's all going to be, kind of created by these tools. But you've got this one thing, this actual photograph of this person, and it's one of the rare photographs that was ever taken of this person. Write that into your scene. Maybe the first time you show that picture, just celebrate how real that is. I did a documentary about Einstein some years ago, and we happened to get the great privilege given to us by, I think it was Hebrew University in Israel, happened to have Einstein's actual notebook where he did his math and he worked out how the universe works. And we were the first people, because they had just developed a high-res, high-def scanning ability. We were the first people to get to broadcast images of this on television. And so we really, we celebrated that. But we also wanted to go then into an animated sequence where we're going to explain what is the math, what's going on there. And so then it just turned into animation, and then clearly became a cartoon, and you do that. So I think that's one way of sort of having fun with these sources.
One of my concerns is, it's so tempting to take creative license with this technology. And yet, we have responsibility as documentary filmmakers to the truth in an age where the truth is getting so blurred. You go on YouTube, go on TikTok, go on any social media, and they are, putting forth the most outrageous lies, and twisting videos to, make politicians look stupid on both sides. And, how, I think you're right about DPA and other organizations, producers, DPA and other organizations that are creating guidelines. Editors have done that as well, and other guilds. But how, it's on my mind all the time, is like, where is this going to go? Like, how do we use it, like, for archival purposes, for instance, and kind of let it be, is it just a function of putting in the credits that we've been using AI? You don't want to like super it every time it takes you out of the story, right? So
I think that's definitely one way people are going. I think there's a lot of creative ways we're going to see people go with this. And I think in terms of, I've been working on a project for many years, but it never materializes because the landscape's changing so much. But the project is called The End of Trust, and like kind of this idea of like what happens in a post-trust environment, which a lot of people who study information and disinformation believe that now we're in this like essentially post-trust environment where you can't really just believe what you see anymore because what you see can be so easily generated or manipulated. And so what happens, and there are a lot of tools out there that kind of help for that. There are a lot of guidelines that help for that. Like one of my favorite organizations is called the Content Authenticity Initiative, and they build tools like with like a lot of the big camera manufacturers and Adobe and all these places around what's called content provenance that tracks like in massive databases what images are actually real, like what the provenance is of the images. And I think personally that what would be great in historical factual documentaries if we start developing provenance sheets for the images that we're using, and so someone can go to your website or the films whatever and look at a provenance sheet, and it could say this image was generated by AI and this image is from this library and this image is from this thing. And I know it's a lot of work, but I mean standards wise I think that would be a great way. And like in the credits you could just be like, check out the provenance sheet at this link. And then for those of us who want to know what's real and what's not, there's provenance. So anyway, I think I really encourage people to either join the Content Authenticity Initiative to like follow what they do, to really like look at content provenance as you make films. But I think it's just one thing.
I would also say just, from a personal standpoint, because the guidelines, obviously it's total Wild West. Everything is so new, right? So the guidelines are coming fast and furious from a million different places. That being said, I'll also mention the BBC has some guidelines that people are looking towards as standards that you can look up. But from your own personal standpoint, when you're using this stuff, I would say use your own judgment. There are things that I know I could do that make me queasy. I could do things with 11 Labs with the voices. I could do things with the video, or I know all kinds of things, and I just don't want to do it. So I don't. That's my barometer.
Yeah.
As a starting point.
I often tell people ethics is for the editing room. When you're shooting and gathering, you go as far as you can, you push as far as you can. Yeah. But where you make those decisions is in the edit room, whether you've crossed the boundary, whether you have to explain whatever.
I just had one positive thing that I found kind of surprisingly uplifting. I was asked to speak in front of the New York State Bar Association, which was pretty cool. And I said, well, what do you want? Well, you guys probably know everything, right? And they said, well, no, we don't actually know how filmmakers actually use this, or what can you actually do with it? So I showed, I kind of gave a demo of all the different things you could do. And then they said, oh, thank you so much. And then they spent the rest of the day discussing these things. And they said to me that because them learning how it can be used helps them. They said, basically, now we know what to start working on so we can defend you, and defend your creative process from bad guys or whatever. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. There's a lot of people out there on both sides to help make sure this stuff is used in the best way possible.
Right. As Erica mentioned in the chat, now's the time for you guys to use the raised hand function. I will start calling on you. I could talk forever on this, so don't worry if you don't have questions. We have plenty here, but I'm how is AI being used, as far as you know, in terms of distribution and outreach? You know, we talk a lot about how handy it is when we're in the fundraising stage, pitch decks, log lines, all that stuff. But
So enormously, enormously powerful and helpful, and I'm sure people are using it this way for outreach and for marketing and all that kind of stuff. So if you need to write educational materials, anything you need to write, anything that would be done by a marketing or advertising person, or even just someone who's doing the work of communicating the message of your film or the value of your film, it can help in that creative way. In terms of actually finding those places, it could do some research in that regard. But Basil, do you have
are you thinking of any specific tools though, Philip, or just in
honestly, any of the large language models,
Okay.
And use deep research mode to especially in the research where if you're looking for contacts because you want to get the real contact information.
One obvious
I would
place.
second what Philip is saying. You know, any kind of deep research for actual, like, anything like searching across the web is fantastic for finding context, finding resources that you might have not known about, like, and then doing, you know, helping with your marketing and all
You
that.
know, one obvious difference from 2 years ago is that ChatGPT wasn't tied into the internet back then. You know,
Wow.
this deep. Remember those days?
Yeah.
Now, you know, we're told all the time, you know, find films that are similar to yours. You know, if you're looking for an outreach person, maybe you want somebody who worked on a film that had similar subject matter. Go into ChatGPT and go like, what films? Here's my synopsis. What films are out there? What documentaries have had similar subject matter?
Right. But by the way, I would say it's one tool. I think that they are not at all replacing any other thing you would do. I would just, because they work ridiculously fast, I mean, almost instantaneously, or maybe within half an hour, you're going to get a tremendous amount of information. But also, I think it's highly likely it's going to be missing things. It's definitely, especially if you're using it to find people, I don't know that it's going to be the best thing. When it comes to writing the materials, it's tremendously helpful. But as far as research, again, just also do your own legwork. In addition.
Yeah, it's a starting point, but that said, you know, I'm looking for, you know, I'll be doing a crowdfunding campaign in the fall. I'm looking for, you know, identifying my target audience, my niche target audience, and asked ChatGPT, and I swear, we were talking about this before, but I swear before I was done typing and hit the enter button, it was already like probably answering my question because it took it 3 seconds to spit out 10 potential partner organizations. And then I asked it for contact information, and it gave me like, you know, I think this person, you know, you want to go to the marketing head here, you know, or I mean, it was pretty awesome.
Soon you're going to be able to say, call them up, right? And they're going to show up on your Zoom.
Call them up and let's work on your pitch.
Yeah, well, it'll do. Yeah. One other thing I would just say is, by the way, this deep research thing, in a similar type of research. So I use deep research a lot for technical questions. And as many of you know, like I'm fairly technically savvy, but not a genius by any means. But, you know, at least once a day, I've got some kind of strange things happening on my computer. I got to figure this out. So I got a hard drive, an external hard drive is not showing up on my desktop. The normal path for finding a solution to that is I go to Google, I search, I get a million websites, I click on all of those, and now I'm hunting through discussion boards and Reddit, right, which is a discussion board, and trying to find good information and trying to figure out, is this a real answer? Is this a crazy person or whatever? And all that kind of stuff. And I do all that work. It's really frustrating and demoralizing. And I get all these bits of information that are not organized. Deep research has solved that completely, because deep research is the one doing all that. Not only is it doing it over a couple or 2 or 3 or 4 websites, it's doing it across hundreds, if not thousands of websites. And it then delivers this incredibly well. I cannot overstate how this is one of the most eerie artificial intelligence experiences I have is when deep research delivers this report. And it leads me through the process of working out the solution while including all these different bits of information it found with links to every fact. So I can check to make sure that's a real thing. So it'll do the same thing for marketing research or any kind of research you need to work on. So
I can't help but notice we have lots of questions, raised hands. So I will start that mode. Peter, you've been very patient. Take it away.
Which is unusual.
Yeah.
So Basil's talking about the content authenticity angle of this. And one of the things that I've become aware of as a content creator using YouTube and CapCut and these other visual tools is that the rights now that these corporations are assuming in their terms of service are egregious. They are everything all the time in perpetuity. So when we talk about the beginning of the funnel, where these language and image models are coming from, I think we need to be aware of what it is, the content that we're feeding into the, into the monster. So just heads up.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Gabriella.
Hi, Doug. What a pleasure being back after so long. I have a question about E&O. I know that I just want to ask if anybody gone through E&O and if anybody knows of any E&O that is dealing with this AI aspect for documentaries.
Can you be a little bit more specific about what you mean? I mean, there's general E&O that you need for any film that you're gonna, try and get a license for or get distribution for. What is it about AI that is, differentiated here?
Thank you. I was just wondering if our group, had anybody in E&O who was more AI savvy that would recommend.
is there a lawyer in the house?
Yeah, that's a question for chat. So I think if anybody has recommendations, can help Gabriella out in the chat, that'd be great.
I mean, it's a
But
great
none of
question
us
because
have
it's,
come to-
I was going to say, it's a universal thing, right? Everyone is going to start encountering this. I feel like this fall, right, the next half of this year, all these things are really going to start to become active as people try to create and sell their projects using bits of AI.
One obvious use of it is like, what are some of the best companies, who do I go to for, insurance? So there you go. Melvin, hello.
Hi there, folks. The question I have is, what is the best model for transcribing interviews? Because I know that most of them can get to like 90%, but then you still have to go through the whole damn thing. Anyway, I'm assuming you'll have to go through it anyway just to double check. But which one is the most accurate? And
Well,
secondarily, there's a webinar that I attended yesterday called Mirage Studio that basically creates actors. So you can use it for marketing, learning videos. Phenomenal. I just want to know if you are aware of it and have tried it out.
I'm seeing that I've never used Mirage, but I'm seeing that there are a lot of great comments in the chat for like really good transcription services. For me, I just use Premiere's transcription. I'll just dump a project into Premiere, have the auto transcription. Again, it gets it to 90%. And it's you got to figure out if you're using for internal or external. If I'm going external, it's always human eyes on it, checking it while it's being said. But yeah.
I think that 11 Labs recently upgraded their transcription service, and it's 11 spelled out, 11labs.com. And they call it, you go to speech, it's a little confusing. You go to speech to text, and that gets you to transcription. I believe that they were rated the highest for transcription. It's not necessarily inexpensive. It may be more than others. So it's another contender, I would say. Somebody mentioned Rev. I've used Rev for a million years. And I've actually used Rev human transcription for a long time. And their auto transcription is okay. I didn't think it was phenomenal, but it was okay. And I use, again, like Basil, well, instead of Premiere, I use Avid, and Avid also has built-in transcription within it. The nice thing, of course, about when it's done within your nonlinear editor is that you click on the words and it takes you right to that spot in the footage. Lastly, I would just mention another one that, and Basil, you said you use a lot, which is Descript. Also
Yeah,
does
Descript is fantastic. And I use their beyond transcription, they have a new AI service that they amazingly named Underlord. And their Underlord tool we'll use to actually just give us versions of edits of things, where you can prompt it and say, give me an edit for these speakers where they all talk about a blue couch. And then it's like, here's your sequence of people talking about blue couch. And then you can drop that. You can take the XML, bring it to Premiere, and then you've got an edit. Or you can have it beyond the blue couch. So you can actually be like, give me a 1 minute thing where, compelling edit where, people are talking about whatever it is. And it'll give you those. And so a lot of times when we're editing, we'll use that to kind of try out new things and sample stuff.
Yeah. I'll just add Adobe Premiere also has transcription. Not great, but it's in the ballpark.
Yeah. I see Alex just in the chat said, I think Avid's transcription tool is a paid add-on. If that's the case, it's worth whatever price it costs, because it's an unbelievably useful thing.
Yeah. Fiona, unmute yourself, please.
Sorry, I didn't think I'd be so up so quickly. First of all, thank you very much for this great informative session, and Philip for everything you do on Monday night. I hope to get back there. We here at One World are currently in pre-production on historical documentary, which has very little archival material available on the protagonists. Just generally, what is the process and what does one need to work with a human being, i.e. an AI specialist, and what's their title? A brief, a script, a mood board? Do we provide the few images available? And generally, what's an hourly rate for such a specialist?
This is such a new field, but I've been definitely seeing a lot of AI directors or people who call themselves AI directors or out there who you can bring into a project. I don't know the rates because I never actually used one because I'm too much of a tinkerer on my own. But I know that there are a lot of people kind of pushing themselves out as AI directors who can basically, you tell them what you want and they know the tools that are in their tool set that they love to work with, and they can get you there. Yeah, but again, I don't know much more. I don't know who's doing it and all that stuff.
Ultimately, what it comes down to is, because a couple other people have asked me similar questions, maybe on a slightly bigger scale, looking for bigger projects, bigger projects that they wanted to sell or get someone on board to take care of for them. Essentially, you're hiring a production company. I mean, it's no different than anything else. Or you're hiring a craftsperson like you would hire an animator. So I think my guess is should just work out to an hourly or flat rate along the lines of those things. I mean, the amazing thing is, though, again, for better or worse, instead of hiring multiple different people, you may be hiring one person. But I'm just going to remind people, by no means does AI move fast in the way you might think. It is a slow, especially the more careful you are. And I love that one thing you mentioned, Basil, is like how we're starting to see AI shorts, for instance, that are really well written for the first time. And the true storytellers are starting to show up. And they're the ones who are first having the shock of like, oh, I need to get thousands of outputs from the AI just to get a small number. It's like, oh yeah, that's just like shooting. It's just like,
well, and even to that point, it's interesting because, you talk about the deep research, and I love the deep research, but people are like, oh, AI saves you time. And I'm like, no, now I have to read dozens and dozens of all the prompting I'm doing is creating so much content that now I'm spending all this time having to weed through. And my big thing about AI is you want to make sure that you put yourself into the end result. Make sure you're in the end result. You can use it as a piece of the process, or or like, you know, dip in and out in multiple points of the process, but make sure that you're the director or you're the editor or you're the whichever role you're playing in the film, that you yourself are in the film as an artist who is making those creative decisions. And I think when we can easily with that become overwhelmed, or personally, I can become overwhelmed with the amount of content that it is producing, and then I have to go and be like, okay, wait, who am I in this? Like, it like helped critique my treatment and gave me all this research and did all these things. And I'm like, okay, it's like I'm starting to have to be like, okay, what's my through line? And how do I maintain myself as a director, a creative director, or a producer in this role? And I think that's an interesting challenge.
It's a great point, Basil, because like just in a simple couple of ChatGPT queries, you know, I started conversing about different aspects of my film, and I realized I'm having now like what seems to be probably a 30-page scroll of, you know, that's all over the place.
Totally.
And, you know, I would just caution people to like start a new chat when you change the subject, you know,
Yes.
from marketing, you know, from, you know, a research phase to a distribution phase to a production phase.
And the other, yeah. And the other thing I'll add, and we talked about this kind of before we started this whole conversation, which is someone did a research paper recently about AI as a sycophant that will constantly be like, oh, you're doing great, great idea. I'm amazing content, brilliant thinker, you know, and like, it's like you have to really prompt it away from that, or like put it in your settings of like, you know, like Philip said that he has it in his settings to be like, please don't flatter me. You know, it's like,
don't suck up. Yeah.
right. And I think there's a way that that can actually just like a little bit shift how you think about the response. And so like recently, a short story, I was recently trying to get something, I like was feeding it this treatment that I had done, and was like, please give me critical feedback. And I was like, this is good for this and this is good for this. And I was like, no, no, no. I don't care what it's good for. I already think it's great. I want you to be like my opposite. Tell me where it's going to like succeed and where it's going to fail in the marketplace. And it was like, here are all the holes in your project, and here are all the ways it's going to fail in the marketplace. And I was like, thank you. But it took so much prompting to get it to that. And I was like, I think that's really important for you to like not get caught up in AI as a sycophant, you know?
Yeah.
By the way, another pro tip, something I love to, one of my favorite things to do with the LLMs or like ChatGPT is have it create two personas and have them debate. So one of them is pro, one of them is con, or you can have 10, you know, each of them that has a different point of view, and have them argue your project among, and that is actually really helpful too. And it does it right away. You know, you get a whole output. So.
They were very good in preparing questions for this session
excellent.
too. Yeah, of course, I didn't have time to get to any of them, but anyway. And before I get to Dennis, just one thing. There's so much good information flying around in the chat. I just want to remind everybody before you head out, save the chat. Depending on what version of Zoom you have, it's either in the very top, these three dots on the top of your meeting chat, or it's where you put in the message. But click on those three dots and it'll go right to a save chat, and it'll save it somewhere on some device of yours. Okay, Dennis, you're up.
Cool. Hey, thank you. What I'm wondering is, I have found over the past year, well, you talked about using ChatGPT. Phil talks about using ChatGPT largely, and then Basil, you're talking about using multiple tools and spreading yourself out across multiple tools. Aligned with the recent conversation we just had, this recent thread, I am finding I'm coaching my ChatGPT to understand who I am, and I call it on its bullshit. So I actually am investing in this time to say, like, now it knows, like, oh no, you're going to be quick and you're going to be this way. And I have to remind it not to blow smoke, as we see. But I'm just wondering what you guys think about those different strategies. I mean, obviously we're going to have to find some niche things, but as a large audience, do we find it more beneficial to say, hey, let me commit to this one service, because then it's going to get to know me better and I'll have better results as I go through time, because it's learning. Basically, you know, I think most of us have had a great experience bringing in an intern, then getting them to be an associate producer and getting them a real salary and being stoked that that's actually happening, and then having them be like, yo, you're a fucking rat, like this is awesome. And then looking at ChatGPT not to replace people, but for now independent. That was in my ad world, but now, and as an independent filmmaker, I'm like, and I'm actually a teacher too. I use it to teach, so I have to be very careful. Um, so I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about those two different strategies, and and what you're seeing, the value of staying with the one, so you're conditioning it for more accurate.
I think it's a both. I think both things are possible. Like, I don't think you need to, you can train your ChatGPT, you can like put more knowledge in its knowledge base, and more personalized settings in the personalized settings thing, and like have that know, and then still use other tools for different things. Like, I think that, all the tools compete to be the best tool. Like I said, for me personally, I like to use different tools for different things. And all those tools are kind of learning who I am. And sometimes I like that. And like the other day I went in, I cleared my ChatGPT memory because I wanted a fresh start with it. Because I was like, this is starting to give me answers that are too like recursive. And I'm like, I don't want that. So, I think sometimes the like over personalization can work against you. I think sometimes the personalization can work for you. So anyway, sometimes I'll open ChatGPT in like a private window, not logged in, and just ask questions there. Like, I think there's a lot of ways people can use this stuff. I tend to be like, I'm the mind map person of tools, and I think some people are like the singular person. I think it's just what works for you.
Yeah, I would say the memorization does have a benefit, but as Basil was saying, it also sometimes has a downside. They haven't worked it out yet. So it really is also very clearly one of those things that creates lock-in on that, that product, and that can be a great thing. I'm happy to be locked in on a product that works really well. But I also definitely want to constantly be aware of what the other ones are doing. And there aren't so many that you can't try them all out. I'll tell you one thing that's really helpful to do is take the same prompt or the same task and give it to multiple LLMs. It's time consuming, so you don't do it all the time, but maybe every once in a while, every few months or whatever, you'll immediately get now it's only an answer about how the LLM deals with that particular task. It may be brilliant on other things, but you'll very quickly get a difference, between them. That's kind of helpful.
We still have a bunch more questions. Basil and Philip, can you stay a little bit beyond our cutoff? Great.
Yeah.
Thanks. That said, folks, try and be as concise as you can with your questions. Joel, you are up.
Thanks so much. I wanted to thank you for this shout out to Archival Producers Alliance. I posted the link to the Gen A guidelines there. And I think that's important. I just kind of wanted to, like, big picture question about AI. I'm not a big fan of AI personally, but, I'm not against it, except in cases where it either is used to bypass hiring creatives, or it's used to scrape other creatives' data without their permission. But that's also kind of the whole game, I think, for these companies. And I'm wondering, like, what is the possibility of AI versus the actual use case of it, like how it's actually going to shape out. I mean, like, using an example of like Facebook is a great tool to connect people worldwide. I think we all have kind of accepted that that is not what Facebook is now. And I'm wondering what you think of the overall picture when you think of not just what AI is possible, like what is possible with AI, but what is actually going to happen given, Silicon Valley's sort of long history now of really breaking shit and dismantling democracy and a lot of, it's not a great track record, I should say.
Are you possibly referring to the idea that 1 in 5 Silicon Valley developers think that it will lead to the downfall of civilization within 5 years? Is that possible?
No, because personally, I think that's all part of the marketing ploy. I think that's a way to persuade investors that this is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. I think in a more banal way about sort of getting downsizing companies and firing people and basically like Uber is not a tech company. It's a company that is basically trying to rewrite the rules of labor and bring the profits up rather than down at the people.
Joel, I'm going to cut you off for a second because this is such a big topic you're opening up, and I think it's sort of beyond the scope of what we're trying to do here. It's its own discussion for another day. In fact, we've done a couple over the years that are archived on the D-Word's YouTube channel, including one with the Archival Producers Association, two from there. But we have such limited time. We have a bunch of questions, and I don't even know how we can begin to answer what you're asking, unless Philip and Basil, if you have a quick thought about that. But
I don't. I also think it's like a huge conversation that is like could take us, another.
Yeah.
The intro would be like the next 90
We
minutes.
just want to know how we can get funding here,
Yeah, I'd say that question is above my pay grade. I don't
Okay. On that note, AK, hey.
I just wanted to introduce my friend David, who actually created a tool for documentary filmmakers to create, use AI. He produced Last Flight Home that MTV bought, and then also as a software engineer, so created something that we all need. I just wanted him to explain how. So StorySense, we talked about, I posted the link for transcribing. You don't just transcribe, you create a rough cut and it puts it back into Premiere. It saved my life in my last short with 13 participant interviews. I was able to what seemed like daunting on a paper edit was done like that in terms of creating one story out of all 13 interviews and bringing it back as rough cut to Premiere.
Cool.
So David, do you just want to chat real quick before we
come on.
Hey, guys.
David on.
I guess I should get off camera for this one.
There you go.
Thanks, Ari. By the way, I'm new to the group. As Ari said, I've been producing docs for the last 10 years or so, mainly at Interloper Films. I'm building this AI software. I don't know. When AI first came out, the dream I had sort of was that if we had AI that knew about storytelling and it knew our footage, then that would be a very, very powerful combination. I didn't really see I saw a lot of the on-screen stuff, which is admittedly pretty awesome as well, like Bio and Sora. And then I saw a lot of let's get a minute, social cut, sort of an auto cut or whatever. I didn't see anything really geared around more professional workflows. So that's sort of what I've been building. I think the simple thing is it's ChatGPT hooked up to your footage, but it's a lot more complicated than that. And there's a lot of tools built on top of it to really aid you and creating your story. So
David, can you put more info about it in the chat? Or any links to where we might get more info?
Totally. We've been in stealth mode, so there's not we have a website, but it's a one pager or whatever. But I'll post my contact and everything in there. Because even just chatting with other documentary filmmakers, I know what I want as a producer, and I've been building around that and guiding in that way. But we've I've been working with Ari, for instance, and that's been very insightful as to kind of what she's looking for as well.
Also in the chat, when you do that, don't just put a link, because we might see this a week later in the chat. So put a little context, a reminder.
I'll put a little blurb. But I would love to just chat with people. We have the beta too. We can trial with people, but hearing from others, it's great. So
great, thanks, David. The more you can put in the chat, the better.
We'll do.
Yeah, and David, if you could reach out to me, and I would love to have you come speak to our AI cafe.
You're already on my. I've got the AI cafe noted from within.
You're on the hit list, Philip.
Okay.
Okay, we've got. Let me see. 4 more questions lined up. We're going to close it off after these 4. No more hands raised. Anyway, so Alex, Lila, Fernanda, and then Rob.
Hey guys, thanks for
Alex.
doing this. This has been really, really informative. And if you've already covered this, because I had to step away for a little bit, I apologize for asking the question. But if you haven't, I'm really curious to what you think. If you have read the Apple white paper, The Illusion of Thinking, Understanding the Strengths and Limitations of Reasoning Models via the Lens of Problem Complexity. If you've read that, and if you have, what do you think of it?
Basil.
Yeah, I read it and I think that it doesn't really change how I'm using it now. Like I don't like I'm like cool, like Silicon Valley is gonna do Silicon Valley and they're gonna keep working problems out in the public sphere, and that's another way that they're doing that. And it literally still doesn't do anything like the tool is doing what I need it to do in a lot of ways, and I will keep using it as such.
As a man of science myself, and a former man of science, I used to work in science. I hate to throw shade on researchers of any kind, so I don't want to do that. So I say half facetiously that it's interesting that the only white paper I've ever seen that talks about how AI can't do something is published by the company that is the least productive in AI at the moment, with Apple. Apple's AI is just
I mean,
not.
well, the question then is that, I mean, they sort of held off on investing in AI because they were doing this paper. And it's interesting that their findings indicated, for anybody who hasn't read it, is that the large reasoning models kind of fail when the problem reaches a certain level of complexity. And that's probably, I think, why Apple didn't invest in it, because again, because they were looking at this problem, they were going, oh, wait a second, we're not going to believe the hype.
I
So I
will
mean, I think it's not really the accusing them of, or saying that they're because they're the only one who are not doing it, their research is invalid. I think that's I don't think that's a valid argument. I mean, their research is very extensive, and they even go into, like, they actually literally put the calculus down in the paper that they were using to test these
No, I was just
large reasoning
joking.
models.
I was just joking.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, but I think it's really interesting. But I also
I'm
think
the
it's really
biggest Apple fanboy in the world, so
right. Yeah. But
but
I think it's really interesting that Basil, what you said, that it doesn't change what you're doing with it. So anyway, that's really interesting. I mean, I
I
guess
Hey,
will say
Alex,
though
this is
that
Erica. I just want to jump in for a second because we do have other questions we have
anyway,
to get
okay. Yeah.
to.
I'm
But
done.
I saw somebody did put that in the chat, but a few people were asking so that they could see that article or white paper or whatever it is. Thank you.
And thanks, Alex. Lila, can you come on camera?
Oh, I'm sorry, my camera is not working for some reason, but
Okay.
so think it's a quick question. Is there a good option out there to be able to do something like upload an audio of someone's voice who's no longer living, and be able to have the narration of their voice for, let's say, an archival letter?
yes. So 11 Labs will do that. In fact, that's pretty much what translation does. So you're taking almost all the sites will do that. So I would say you could do it. I thought what you were going to say was this one, when I talked about there are certain things that make me queasy and I decided not to do them with AI very early on. When the first day I was using 11 Labs, this is 2 years ago, I realized, oh, I have all these tapes of interviews with my grandmother who's no longer around. I could, give it to 11 Labs or ChatGPT, and I could then talk to my grandma. I could ask her questions and get answers in her voice. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. That creeps me out. So,
Well, yes, I was
people
interested in
have.
doing that as well. But so you are able to have 11 Labs can mimic someone's voice.
Oh, is that
And
you mean mimic? Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
That's what 11 Labs does. And I'll just mention there are two levels, and Peter Crosby knows this because he's done it. With 11 Labs, there's you can give it a tiny bit, like a 30 seconds or a minute of your voice, and it'll create a synthesized voice from that, and then anything you type will be spoken in that voice you gave it. There is another version called the Pro version where you have to give it 2 hours of someone's voice for it to do a really high quality version. But even the low quality version is not bad.
So Philip, Basil, what's to keep somebody from using VO3 to do a little short film, Buster Keaton and Greta Garbo meet at a cafe and have a, they're on Match.com, they're meeting on a date, and
I think I see your next project.
This is a good idea, Doug.
Yeah, go for it. Nothing's to keep it. I mean, nothing's to keep. I mean, nothing's to keep anyone from doing anything in the visual audio landscape right now with
other than getting sued, perhaps.
Well, if you type in an actual person's note, some of the services, not all of them, will block you. So if you asked for now, Buster Keaton, I think, is probably in public domain,
but you can. I mean, there are tools that aren't the mainstream tool. Like, there's always a way for someone to build a fake. Like a replica of someone in video or audio. I mean, the quality is like as the tools kind of go down the chain, the quality also goes down the chain. But people are doing it, and they're getting passed around. So you can do the sweet romantic ones that you just mentioned, or you can do the more nefarious ones that other people do and pass around.
Got it.
Rory, what are you finding?
By the way, I just copyrighted that idea. As we were.
Okay.
So you folks out there, don't even think of it.
I just pirated that idea. So we're on.
Fernanda, welcome.
Hi. After such profound questions, I have a very pedestrian one. But to add the layer of sophistication, there is another paper, MIT, on interacting with the brain, etc. Just throwing paper so you guys know that I not only ask pedestrian question. My pedestrian question: give me a time frame of the learning curve. If I were to open VO now until I'm not talking mastery, until I'm functional and can get something out, are we talking 10 or 100 hours?
Today. If you opened VO3 right now and you started prompting it, you'll become a pedestrian level prompter of video by the end of the day. If you were let's say you spent a full workday on it, by the end of the day, you're going to have your own thoughts and opinions about how it functions. By the end of the week, you're going to start matching it with image generators, and you'll have video. You can have video you can cut together. I mean, the learning curve is very rapid, but that learning curve is balanced by how you think as a filmmaker, and how it's like the images that you're going to put in your final edit and the way you cut them together is how you learn to be a storyteller and what your taste is, and how you push that taste out, all that stuff. It's we need to still learn how to be storytellers and filmmakers and editors and all that so we can go and create this raw material, what Philip at one point when we were talking a year ago said, I think of AI as generative AI as another form of animation. So we can go take this animated assets and start cutting them together. So I would say open up VO.
Yeah, I was talking the technical part, assuming you master dramaturgy at the basic level. Yeah. I'm talking about the technical part.
Yeah, I would just add, I think another upbeat note I'm surprised to be able to add, actually, it just came to mind, is that the thing that's going to keep us all employed, or many of us employed, is you go to ask AI to do something and it does it. And the thing that's going to immediately separate the artist and the one who's going to make it in the arts from the ordinary person is that it requires an enormous amount of patience. And, I remember when digital editing came out, nonlinear editing came out, there was this thought that, oh my God, the producer director is going to be able to sit and edit the film themselves. And, there are plenty of jobs I was on where I said to the director, oh, you're welcome to sit here and try it. And they do it. And I come back, half an hour later and they're like, I don't know how you do it. I just don't have the patience. It's not that they don't know how to use the tools. It's just in, out, splice in, splice out, whatever. But, another tool I recommend to everybody is remember, you don't just when it doesn't do what you want, the thing is your job. And actually what I find the fun part of AI is to get it to keep working it towards the thing you want. So I remember my stepfather, one of the first days that I got him to use ChatGPT, he had to type a speech. He had to come up with a speech to give to a group. And I asked him, I said, how did it go with ChatGPT? And he says, oh, it doesn't work. I was like, what do you mean it doesn't work? He says, well, I asked it to write the speech and the speech it wrote was bad. So I was done. But no, those of us who work, especially if you're an editor, but any kind of artist, any kind of crafts person, we all know that it's actually a matter of sitting there and working with the tool so that you are 100% part of the process, as it turns out. And that's a good thing, I think. So.
As AK said in the chat, use AI to learn AI.
Oh, absolutely. It's a fantastic thing. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
AK, yeah. Thanks. Last question, Rob, bring us home.
Yeah, and I'm embarrassed that the question I was going to ask is as banal as it is. So I'm just going to ask the question, and then anybody in chat who's got ideas, put it there, and then I'll follow up with I've reframed my real question here. The simple, I hope, one is there software out there that can watch my movie and create an audio-visual script with video description on one side and the dialogue on the other? But what I'd like to ask these gentlemen is really put it in the chat if anybody can tell me. The question I want to ask is, what do we think about the big, beautiful bill and the stipulation that AI kind of gets a free ride for 10 years from any state legislative control, et cetera? And I'll leave it at that.
I think that
I'll just say on the video part, Google Gemini can see video, I believe. Yeah.
And on the regulation part, I'll say regulation is very important.
Yeah. Yeah, especially with this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Wild West out there, and they're,
Keep working on your Congress people.
Yeah. That's it, folks. Thank you. Basil, Philip, thank you for coming back. Thanks for bringing us up to date on the latest and greatest. It was super helpful, and check out the chat for all the appreciative comments in there. And thank you all for coming.